Good morning. I'm here along with the Interim Deputy Director Joanne Tran, and we're here today to present the Houston Police Department FY 2027 proposed budget, which includes a general fund allocation of just over $1.2 billion. I'm honored to be here on behalf of Chief Diaz to represent the hardworking classified officers and civilian professionals who serve the residents of Houston every day. Under the leadership of Chief Diaz, HPD continues to focus on accountability, fiscal responsibility, and above all, service. We continue to reinforce the foundation of this department by building new initiatives that are designed to improve efficiency, support our officers, and better serve the people of Houston. I'm proud to report that crime is down in the city of Houston across all NIBRS categories. Response times are down across all categories, and crashes are down across all categories as well. Some areas of progress that I'll touch on at the end for accomplishments are our recruitment and retention, operational changes in patrol that improved officer wellness, decrease response times, and decrease overtime spending. The addition of Operational Support Division and the Patrol Support Unit, which we're very proud of. And as we move into the specifics of the proposed budget, I just want to sincerely thank the Mayor and City Council and all of you here for your continued partnership and commitment to public safety. Your support has allowed the department to continue to improve and meet the needs of citizens of Houston, and we greatly appreciate y'all. So here we have the HPD org chart. The significant change here from last year is if you look at the very top right, the yellow box to the right of Chief of Staff is Operational Support Division. And like I said, I'll touch on that toward the end. HPD at a glance. So the numbers as of April 30th, 2026, you see in front of you. The ones I'd like to highlight, so our breakdown by gender, the department as a whole, 76% male, 24% female. If you look at our classified workforce, our police officers, we're 81% male, 19% female. If you look at our cadets right now in the academy, it's 79% male, 21% female. So hopefully in 7 or 8 months, our numbers will increase on female officers. And then if you look at our ethnicity, we are a majority minority department. So we are broken up, classified, Hispanic officers, 36%, white officers are 34%, African American officers, 21%, Asian 8%, and then other or mixed makes up 1% of the department. You know, we serve an incredibly diverse city, and we are very fortunate and blessed to have a police department that represents the community we serve. And there was efforts made a very long time ago to increase those numbers, but the fact is today that the city of Houston is so diverse, and the citizens that live in our city and the ones that have a desire to serve, we have to do very little to ensure that the diversity of our applicants is maintained. You know, we have a lot of people in the city with a heart for service, and the applications and the ethnicity breakdown of our applicants show that. Strategic guidance alignment. So here we're discussing the alignment to the mayor's defined priorities, initiatives, and the way our budget breaks down. So as you can imagine, 95% of ours goes in public safety, and then a little bit of quality of life and government that works. Plans to eliminate the gap. We've outlined HPD's $8.9 million budget reductions by program. So as we look to try to make reductions to better align our operations and our staffing levels with the city's current needs and our current organizational needs, along with prioritizing services to the community, we cut $8.9 million out of this budget, and we made up for it in 2 ways, or we accounted for it in 2 ways. Number one, $1.5 million came from our EPRO system, which is our program allowing retired officers to come back and work on a part-time basis for an hourly wage to help with a whole variety of things. As of July 1 of 27, that program will be eliminated for now. That accounts for $1.5 million. Another $7.4 million comes from 91 FTEs or full-time equivalent civilian positions that we are freezing for this budget year. Our civilian workforce at the Houston Police Department is absolutely invaluable to us. We hate to be at this point, but when we look at the services we need to provide to the citizens of Houston, this is the 2 spots we felt like we could make the cuts right now with the least amount of impact to response times, investigations, and so forth. I would note that this year, we'll touch on this in a minute, but this year our overtime spending is down 22% as opposed to last year by dollar, but it's down 27% by hours worked. As you guys know, we had a contract that gave us a much needed raise, which has also helped with recruiting and retention, which I'll discuss in a little while. But with those contract obligations come raises, and with those raises, the overtime rates go up by hours. So it's not just the financial amount that's important, but it's the number of hours worked that accounts for that financial amount as well. as we move through the budget year, and Joanne will touch on this a little bit, but as we move through the budget year, we're constantly looking at making, I know you folks have heard this already, but savings in other categories to offset the cost. So as budget line items are allocated as the year goes on, our focus as a police department and as an executive staff is to keep the overall bottom line on budget. You know, we may go over on some line items, below on other some line items, but our goal is to meet the final budget at the end of the fiscal year, right, at the end of June. So with that, we'll turn it over to Joanne.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, and good afternoon, council members. Before I begin my piece of the presentation, I'd like to take a moment to recognize the Police Financial Services team for their dedication, hard work in finalizing this year's budget and preparing today's presentation. Their commitment, including many late nights and weekends, made it possible. I appreciate the opportunity to present the FY27 financial budget for HPD and am honored to do so on their behalf. Team, please stand up to be recognized. Thank you.
A lot of money in a small team.
Yes. The revenue by fund is this slide. This slide compares the HPD's FY27 proposed revenue to the FY26 estimate. It's organized by the funding sources. It shows where the biggest shifts are happening. Our total revenue is projected to be decreased by $5,000 for FY27. Let me give you a quick overview of each fund and explain what's driving the changes. The general fund, an increase of $6.3 million, or increase of 8%. The general fund is our largest and most flexible source. It includes reimbursement from the Metro and the Houston airport system, as well as revenues from open records, traffic reports, and take-home vehicles. $5.5 million of that 6.35 increase is related to the Houston airport system reimbursement for the IAH and hobby operations, and hobby also includes the Ellington Airport. Increase is primarily attributed to the 8% increase in the classified base pay for the meet and confer. A $2.2 million increase from the Metro General Mobility Program is now projected for $29.7 million for FY27. An offset by the decrease of $1.3 million is related to a one-time FEMA funds received for the derecho storm that occurred in FY26, but will not occur in FY27. The next fund is the Police Special Services Fund, a decrease of $4.2 million. This fund holds the restricted use revenues, such as special event reimbursements, training grants, and donations. The net decrease is primarily due to the FIFA World Cup and in homelessness costs that was in the Police Special Service Fund, but is now in the grants. The next fund is Auto Dealers Fund, and this is a decrease of $125,000. The Auto Dealers Fund supports regulations of auto dealers, storage lots, and towing operations. Revenues come from licenses, permits, and towing fees. This decrease is due to a drop in revenue from unclaimed vehicles sold at auction, which can fluctuate annually. The next fund is the Child Safety Fund. This fund provides the school crossing guard programs across the 17 school districts in the city of Houston. It is funded by vehicle registration fees and court fines tied to the school zone violations. The next fund is asset forfeiture funds, a decrease of $1.89 million. These funds come from seizures of assets linked to criminal activity. They help support overtime, surveillance, and specialized law enforcement. So only the state forfeiture funds, about $2 million, can be budgeted. Federal funds from the Department of Treasury, Department of Justice, or Department of Treasuries are not allowed to be included in the budget per federal rules. Again, the asset forfeiture, they come from the seizures of assets, so it's not a revenue generating type fund. So it's what we get from our involvement related to seizures of assets in criminal activities. The next fund is the Forensic Transition Fund. That's a decrease of $37,000. This fund offsets costs for city employees working in the Houston Forensics Center. HPD is reimbursed for these personal expenses. So going into FY27, this fund has transitioned to 0 FTEs. Last year, we had one civilian that was in this fund. This coming year, it will be 0 FTEs. And this next fund is a Human Trafficking Recovery Response Fund. This fund is a special revenue fund to comply with changes in Texas law requiring forfeited assets from human trafficking and related prostitution offenses to be used solely to support victims of those crimes. So this is a special fund that requires a separate fund to be set up. And just like Harris County, they also have a Human Trafficking Recovery Response Fund. Again, this fund is only for the support of the victims of those crimes, so it's very specific. This is a chart of the revenue by the fund. HPD's revenue sources are a blend of service reimbursement, restricted use program funds, and special events support. The proposed budget reflects increased activity and planning for FY27, particularly for events, and continues to ensure cost recovery across our operations. This slide provides a visual snapshot of HPD's revenue by fund, and it shows the FY25 actuals, the FY26 adopted budget, FY26 estimate, and the FY27 proposed budget. For the FY27 proposed budget, I'd like to take a moment to describe the makeup of these revenues and their sources. First, the total proposed revenue for FY27 is approximately $114.7 million. Now I'm going to go into the different colors of the funds that it represents here on this chart. The first fund is the general fund for the FY27 proposed is the $87.4 million. This is the largest component of our revenue out of the $114.7 million. And in the general fund, the 87.4, 49 million of that comes from the Houston Airport System reimbursement for the services that we provide at IH and Hobby and Ellington. Another 30 million is reimbursed from the Metro through the General Mobility Program. And another 5 million comes from the administrative fees and indirect cost recovery from the Auto Dealers Fund. And then additional 3 million comes from the take-home vehicle fees, open record requests, and incidental report fees. And for the Police Special Service Fund, $9.4 million is projected for the revenue. $5.2 million is reimbursement for contributions that we have with the external agencies that we work with them on, such as the FBI, DEA, and the management districts, and others for security and event support. $1.2 million is from the business contributions supporting the human trafficking prevention efforts, and $1.2 million is a transfer from the tours. Actually, of that $1.2 million, $980 is from the tours for the downtown district, and another $230 is from the Office of Business Opportunity for the 911 crisis call diversion program that we have with the Harris Center. And then $1.1 million for mobility permits, environmental violator restitution cases, gambling seizures, and other sources. And then $700,000 from the state, and this is for the Law Enforcement Officer Standards and Education, or LEOs, and that's for the police personnel training. The next fund is Auto Dealers Fund, $12.5 million. This fund supports the regulation of auto dealers, auctions, towing, and storage lots. And revenues from the industry licensing, inspecting fees, and towing-related charges. The Child Safety Fund, $3.3 million. Again, the police department is a pass-through. It supports the 600 crossing guards across the city of Houston in the 17 school districts. And again, the revenue is from the vehicle registration fees and the municipal court fines tied to the school zone and parking violations. Asset forfeiture, the revenue here is $2 million. Again, these funds come from the state-level law enforcement actions supports overtime, narcotics investigations, equipment, and other enforcement costs. We don't budget for the federal revenues due to the legal restrictions. And the Forensic Transition Fund is zero for the coming FY27. And the Human Trafficking Response and Recovery Fund is for $104,000. For the revenue highlights, we already discussed that back in slide 7 when we were comparing the variances between the FY27 proposed budget and FY26 estimate. So we will go on to the next slide. This slide shows the revenue by the various programs that we have. Keeping in mind that the outcome-based budgeting on this slide, we list all the relevant programs and performance measures for HPD. Here we'll highlight all the revenues and HPD generates. Again, this is across all funds. The police patrol variance decrease of $122,000 is primarily due to the North Belt facility rental anticipated to expire in 2027 in the Police Services Fund. The Homeland Security Special Events variance decrease of $4.4 million is primarily due to the FIFA World Cup soccer and in-street homelessness being accounted for now in the grants instead of the Special Services Fund. The investigative variance decrease of $1.8 million is primarily due to federal guidelines not allowing the funds from the Federal Department of Treasury and Department of Justice to be budgeted in advance in the asset forfeiture. And the airport system variance increase of $5.5 million is primarily due to the general fund increase reimbursement from HAS for the airport operations. And this is the increase of the 8% in the classified base pay for the meet and confer. The traffic enforcement increase of $2.2 million is primarily due to the increase in Metro General Mobility Program in the general fund. The training variance decrease of $23,000 is due to the training track rental available for use for the full fiscal year in FY27 in the Police Special Services Fund. And the mental health decrease is primarily due to site inspection of the Police Special Services Fund. The next program is a strategic operations variance decrease of $258,000. This is primarily due to the estimate decrease in the number of amount associated with cases cleared awarded to HPD in the general fund. And the last program is administrative service variance decrease of $1.1 million. And this is due to that one-time FEMA payment for the derecho storm in the general fund that is not happening in FY27. This slide presents an alternate view of the Houston Police Department FY27 proposed budget across all funds, excluding grants and capital improvement projects. The total budget display is $1.25 billion. This view enforces that HPD remains labor-intensive department, with the majority of the dedicated to personnel costs. Across all funds, personnel expenditures account for approximately 87.5% of the FY27 budget, while non-personnel account for the remaining 12.5%. In FY27, approximately 83% of the department's $8.9 million in the reduction that Chief Hardin talked about is achieved through the elimination of the 91 FTEs or vacant civilian positions, and the remaining 17% or the 1.5 is realized through the elimination of the employee program of retired officers. These reductions reflect the department's ongoing efforts to streamline operations, prioritize essential services, align available resources with the city's overall budget strategy. This chart on the slide further illustrates the alternate view of FY27 breakdown of the personnel and non-personnel funding for general fund and special funds, again excluding grants and capital improvement projects. Now we'll get into the expenditures by fund. This fund compares the FY27 proposed budget to the FY26 current budget by fund, and it highlights the net changes in expenditures. Personnel costs continue to represent the department's largest expenditure driver, While this slide also highlights strategic funding increases associated with global and citywide events, overall, HPD's FY27 proposed expenditures for FY27 reflect a net increase of $76 million, or 7%, compared to the FY26 current budget. This increase is spread across both our general fund and the special funds. For the general fund, the increase of $87 million, or 87%, the makeup of that increase, $85.3 million, is for the classified compensation for the meet and confer, and it includes the health and pension. $8.9 million is for the restricted account allocations. $6.6 million is for the classified overtime. $3.8 million is for civilian compensation for our HOPE contract and the health and pension. And $8.9 million is for the budget reduction. And $6.6 million decrease is for the approved PBJs for FY26 and 27. The classified overtime, the uniform and equipment, critical positions, the wellness, and the remaining cadet salary incentive. The next fund is Police Special Services Fund. The decrease of $10.6 million is attributed to the FIFA World Cup game that we had budgeted in the Police Special Services at the time when we were doing it in FY26. We did not know that it was going to be a grant from the state. So it was budgeted like when we hosted the Super Bowl, the organizations reimbursed us for that. But since then, we find out it's a grant from the federal and state. The next fund is the Auto Dealers Fund, and this is the increase of the $46,000 is primarily due to the supplies and services. And the Child Safety Fund, the decrease of $87,000. Again, HPD is the middle conduit. We get the funds and we send it straight out to the schools. So this is from the prior balance that's rollover from the previous fiscal year that's not anticipated in FY27. And the asset forfeiture, the $97,000 increase is due to the overtime expenditures for unscheduled events and unallocated capital projects. And the forensic fund, that decrease is because we're going from the 1 to 0 employees for the FY27. This is a expenditures by fund graph. This slide outlines the total expenditures for HPD's general fund and special funds, which is about 97% of our expenditures are funded from the general fund. I'm going to go spend some time to go over the funds and the associated expenditures. Before I do that, let me just tell you the overall number. The FY25 expenditures, the actuals was $1.09 billion. For the FY26 current budget, it's $1.18 billion. For the estimate, it's $1.67 billion. And for our proposed FY27 budget is $1.25 billion. The breakdown of the $1.25 billion, $1.2 billion of that is from the general fund, and this is the 97% of the expenditures. And this supports HPD's operations. It includes personnel, patrol, investigation, and administrative services. The Police Special Services Fund, the expenditures here is $10.1 million, or 0.8%, is used for restricted purposes such as the joint law enforcement efforts, the task force that we have with the FBI and Secret Service and DEA, the traffic control, police training, personnel training through our LEOS program, and the deterrence of human trafficking. The next fund is the Auto Dealers Fund, $13.4 million. This supports regulation and oversights of the auto dealers, storage lots, and towing operations. And the Child Safety Fund, that $3.3 million, is to support the 600 more school crossing guards that's in the school districts in the city of Houston. And the asset forfeiture, $9.1 million. These are restricted use, supporting the drug enforcement, equipment, and overtime. Again, the forensic is 0 for FY27, and the human trafficking recovery response is the $196,000 is to be utilized to address the immediate emergency trafficking victims' short-term needs. This slide goes into the expenditures by program. This slide depicts expenditures funding by programs across all funds, of which general fund comprises of 97%. The net increase of the $76 million, or 7%, is driven primarily by the 8% classified base pay, impacting salaries and benefits associated with the police meet and confer agreement. Additional net variances are primarily attributed to interdepartmental personnel assignments, including appointments, promotions, and organization restructuring. The FY27 proposed budget for all programs include 3.5% increase in civilian salaries and benefits associated with the HOPE and meet and confer agreement. The next several slides provide a more detailed summary of each of HPD's programs. I will highlight each program and reserve time at the end for questions related to the program, budgets, and performance indicators. The Police Patrol Program is comprised of HPD's patrol regions 1, 2, and 3. Each command is responsible for the oversight and operations of patrol within the city of Houston. As you can see, the response time for Priority 1 call, FY26 progress, third quarter is 5.7 minutes, and the Priority 2 calls is 10.9 minutes. As of May, those response times have gone down to 5.5 response time and 10.7 minutes on response time. And the makeup of the patrol contributes $475 million from the general fund, $3.4 million from the asset forfeiture, and the Police Special Services Fund, $1.5 million. So that 480 is what is the funding sources for the police patrol. The Homeland Security Special Event Programs leads in planning and coordination of activities associated with intentional acts of terrorism or natural declared emergencies. This program also assists with the coordination of all special events within the city of Houston and staffs police resources for all city-sponsored special events. The funding for this comes from the general fund, the $54 million. Police special is $2.2 million, and so for this fund is $56.5 million for the funding. Investigations. The investigation program is our second largest program. It's citywide responsibility for delivering specialized investigative police services. In addition to combining the criminal investigation and special investigation commands, this program is also responsible for the review and verification of all gang-related crimes in the Houston area. And the chief mentioned that all of our NIBRS crime is down. You can see for the NIBRS crime against person, that's currently down by 6%. The NIBRS crime against property, down by 25%. And NIBRS crime against society, down 8%. And the funding you can see from all the different sources that we have for the $254 million that supports this program. This is our airport system program. That consists of the IAH and the Hobby, and Hobby also includes the Ellington Field. Consists of the 24/7 police patrol on the passenger screening checkpoints, boarding the gates, remaining in the terminals for breaches of security, weapons, bomb threats, and any other threats to the safety and security. And this is from the general fund, the $45 million. And this we get reimbursed by the Houston airport system. This is a traffic enforcement. This includes the DWI task force, the mobility response team, the motorcycle detail, our radar task force, and highway interdiction. And this is from the general fund, $29.6 million, and this is supported by the Metro Mobility Program. As a part of the measurements, we're looking into visiting the area of reducing the percentage of the vehicle, bicycle, and pedestrian fatality performance measures for FY27 as we look at more of these measurements. Our next program is a Joint Processing Center, and this is a shared service that's managed by Harris County, and it's responsible for the booking and processing of all prisoners arrested by the Houston Police Department. And just a note on these measurements, HPD does not control the average processing time at the JPC for HPD arrest. Our next program is a training program, and it's responsible for the cadets during their training at the police academy, recruiting applicants, conducting background investigations, and making recommendations regarding the suitability of the applicants, and continue education through in-service training for all the HPD employees. And here, just a note that for the cadets, their salary was able to be increased by $10,000 from $42,000 to $52,000, and that was back in FY26. And this has helped in our recruiting efforts. Employee services and wellness. The Employee Services Wellness Program is responsible for psychological evaluation services, department-wide employee well-being, managing employee benefits, hiring and promotions, performance evaluations, and job posting. This program also includes 4 voluntary separation and retirement programs, known as phase-down options, for officers' distribution of the sick, vacation, and compensatory time leave balances. The mental health program provides assistance to consumers through various programs, such as the Crisis Intervention Response Team, Homeless Outreach Team, Crisis Intervention Training, Clinician Officer Remote Evaluation, and the Chronic Consumer Stabilization Initiatives. These are all from our mental health team. Looking at one of the measurements that increased daily outreach for homeless communities and individuals for FY26 progress, third quarter, you see that 5,595 contacts. And this is due to the shortage of staff within the mental health, but they are working on that. They now have a hot sergeant that's in place that's helping with that, and then also a hot lieutenant that's assigned to oversee the operations, and they're getting a civilian staff member on board to help with more of the outreach. This program is our strategic operation, and this strategic operation is responsible for ensuring the effective and efficient operation and uses of resources by the divisions. And the divisions in this program are the records, planning and data governance, field operations, investigative operations, strategic operations, organization support command, emergency communication, command center, property and detention, and the fleet management. And just to highlight on one of the measurements, that maintain error rate below 3% on all police reports submitted in NIBRS. For FY26 progress, third quarter, you see that 5.44%. And that was when the information was downloaded, but currently the rate is at 2% error rate, which is below that 3%, which is the standard certification rate. This next program is our Community Outreach and Victim Services. The Community Outreach and Victim Service programs are relational policing initiatives designed to facilitate public safety through the greater Houston area. Victim Services program provide resources and referrals for crime victims based on their specific needs. Outreach programs focus on crime prevention, community service, youth service, and encourages positive interactions between law enforcement and the greater Houston community. And our next slide, our last slide in the programs, is our administrative services. Administrative service provides the support for leadership and executive support, and this includes the Office of Executive Chief, operational support, legal services, risk management, and general services department. In here is also the reduction of that $1.5 million for the EPRO project. With that, I'm going to pass it back to Chief Hardin.
Thank you, ma'am. So we'll touch on the 3 accomplishments that I want to highlight that I discussed earlier. So the slide in front of you We show this slide every year in the budget presentation. It's also typically shown in other presentations, but the blue lines are graduating cadets, red lines are attrition. And obviously, if you want to increase your manpower, you need the attrition to be lower than your graduating cadets. One of the profound impacts of our new contract, as you guys know, was number one, $10,000 pay raise for cadets, which helped us immensely for individuals that were going to other police departments because their pay was higher while they're in the academy. And then the raise to classified officers, as we go through the 5-year contract, makes us more competitive with every other major police department and smaller or mid-sized police department in the state. And so if you look at the far right, FY26 up until April, you will see that our graduating cadets is significantly higher than our attrition. And this was pulled right up until the end of March, and we just graduated a class of 69 people last week. So I can tell you we are officially over 5,400 classified for first time in a very long time. If you go all the way to the left side, you'll see fiscal year 09, we had a large net gain in classified officers between graduating cadets and attrition. This year, depending on how many of these cadets that just graduated Tuesday get off probation, our net gain for the year will be 150 or above, which is vital to public safety in the city for obvious reasons. You know, as we've discussed countless times, we kept the same manpower since the 1990s until last year and this year, right? Now we're starting to gain officers, and there's a variety of benefits to that besides just the obvious of more cops is a safer city. It allows us to staff divisions that have been short-staffed for a long time. It allows us to create new initiatives that we wanted to do to help our officers and the citizens we serve. So again, we're over 5,400 now. We added 320 classified officers, which is the largest net gain in 17 years. Our current cadet classes in the academy today are at 79 and 76, as well as 2 lateral cadets. And then our NeoGov applications, which if you know any job you apply for at the city, you have to apply through NeoGov. Our NeoGov applications have increased 47% year over year since the first year of the contract. So just a reminder, July 1 of 26 will begin the second year of the contract. And our academy classes grew from pre-raise averages of 41 to 60 to post-raise classes ranging from 72 to 81 recruits. So as we talk about adding more people to the street and being able to implement some projects that we've wanted to for a long time, operational changes in patrol. We started to test 4 10-hour shifts in patrol back in 2022 when I was the assistant chief over Patrol Region 1. And all patrol officers until that time worked 5 8-hour shifts, 2 days off, regardless of what shift or what your days off were. We started to test 4 10s for a variety of reasons. More officer wellness, see if we could decrease response times, decrease different metrics, injured on duty, use of force, due to fatigue, a variety of factors. So when we started to add these bodies last year and this year, it began to give us enough bodies to fully staff our 5 largest patrol stations to allow us to go to 410. So in January of this year, early January, mid-January, late January, our 4 biggest stations that did not have 410s now have 410s. So we're at 7 stations now where the patrol officers work 410s. There's a few stations that have a couple hybrids. They may have 5 or 6 individuals that work 5/8 per shift to help cover that gap. But the 3 days off is showing to have tremendous benefits for our patrol officers and our department and our budget. It allows improving officer wellness, right? Another day off is another day of rest, so decreased fatigue. The shift overlaps, so when you work 5/8, the overlap is 1 hour. So early side is 6 to 2, late side is 7 to 3, and then evening shift would start 2 p.m. to 10, and then 3 p.m. to 11. When you work 410s, you have a wider or a longer overlap of either 2 or 3 hours, depending on where you are. That overlap allows us to spend less overtime. And the way that works out on less overtime is you get fewer late calls because you already have another shift that's been on for an hour or 2. So when you work 5/8, it's not uncommon for in the last hour of your shift to you get 1 or 2 calls for service. If it's a complicated call for service, it's going to take you well over your shift. When you have an overlap of 2 to 3 hours, you're way less likely to get that call. Somebody that came on 2 hours or 3 hours ago is more likely to get the call. So we're seeing a decrease in overtime. There's also early indications that we have less time burned by officers at these stations. That's an added benefit for a number of reasons. 1, more officers on the street. 2, improve officer wellness. The fewer our people call in tells me the happier they are and the healthier they are. Operational Support Division. So as we talk about things we want to do to help our officers and help better serve the citizens of Houston, The Operational Support Division was stood up this year. We started with evening shift. They've been online since October and November, and now we are rolling into night shift. Night shift is currently in training. And what operational support is, it's expanded tactical capabilities to support patrol and investigation. So inside this division, you have our special response team, which used to be our narcotics tactical team. They support services of high-risk search warrants and high-risk arrests for investigations. Our patrol support team, which is the newly developed team, they work 4 10-hour shifts also. And then our patrol K-9 is rolled into that division also. They used to be in tactical operations, and now they're in operational support. The reason for that move, lighten the load on the captain at tactical operations, as well as our K-9 officers work hand in hand every single shift with our operational support, our patrol support team. Our patrol support team enhances patrol effectiveness through tactical and technological support. So these officers are 2-man units. They're spread out all throughout the city, and they are not in the calls for service loop. What they do is volunteer and respond to some of our most high-risk calls with improved technological equipment, so drones, camera systems, and the like, things that take experienced and more hours of training, and also have a higher degree of required oversight based on federal and state law, as well as some other tactical capabilities that the average patrol officer doesn't have. And the idea is for them, they go through an extensive 10 to 12-week training process, both with the equipment but also in tactics. And the idea is for them to show up, help these patrol officers on these high-risk scenes, minimize the use of force used against the suspects. The least amount of force we can use to take anybody into custody is obviously preferred. And the addition of these tools and these officers on the street with this training, we hope over time, as the data plays out, will do just that. Night shift will come online in summer of 26. Like I said, they're in their training right now. Each shift is about 3 sergeants and 20 officers. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you all both for the thorough presentation. It's a big budget. I appreciate going through it with the fine-tooth comb and the detail. I want to start slide 6, plans to eliminate the gap. Community outreach, victim service, 7 vacancies that are being frozen. Is that what the word that was used for the upcoming fiscal year? They're not being eliminated, but they're being frozen?
Correct.
Okay. And these are classified positions?
No, sir.
No, these are civilian positions.
Correct. So all of the FTEs in that 8 million are all civilian, no classified.
Okay, that is one thing that I hear a lot about, you know, the community outreach, the community liaisons, the value that folks find in neighborhoods from having presence at civic clubs and community events. So these positions being civilian, how is it going to impact the community engagement side overall, having them frozen for 1 fiscal year?
In the community outreach and victim services, those 7 civilians were not doing any community outreach. So they were, well, actually, I shouldn't say that, because some of them were from our DART program. As we rotated more classified officers over into our DART program to make sure that we staffed it, we also, our DART program used to be funded through ARPA funds, and when the ARPA funds eliminated or were eliminated, by no stretch of the imagination did we want to get rid of the DART program, so we absorbed it into the general fund and found cost savings in other places to fund that. So the civilian positions that are missing will not impact our community relations at all. In fact, and I know this question will come up, so I'll just discuss it now, but as we have received several different questions about this past year, our community affairs division going away, in air quotes. So there was 71 allocated positions in community affairs. And the idea behind the community affairs division a very long time ago, 70s and 80s when it was developed, was to have a group of people that could liaise with the community. Especially communities did not feel like they were represented by the officers of the Houston Police Department. As I mentioned at the beginning, we are one of the most diverse departments in the country now. 71 allocations of individuals who, they may go out to community events, but our idea of community policing is that all 5,400 of us are liaisons. So someone who goes to a community event, and the only time you may ever see them at that community event, and then you never see them again because they go back to headquarters, is not our idea of community policing. So as we took the officers assigned to community affairs, We kept a core group called Community Engagement Unit or Field Operations, run under Executive Assistant Chief Guzman, a lieutenant, a sergeant, and 8 officers. The others were put out into the stations in the areas that they worked in the most. If you're going to have somebody at your community event, we want it to be an officer that you are very likely to see on a regular basis. The other advantage of gaining classified officers year in and year out, the eventual goal of any police department would be that your officers have enough downtime to significantly engage in the community they serve. When you're short officers, all our folks do is run from call to call to call. They barely even have time to stop and get a drink. They definitely don't have time to stop and visit with the store owner or the shopkeeper or whoever. That is beginning to change. As we are getting more and more officers on the street, it's allowing, again, response times are down. The more officers we get on the street, the more it will allow our officers to engage with the community outside of the regular calls for service.
Thank you for the answer there. Vice Mayor Pro Tem Peck.
Thank you, Vice Chair, and thank you both for the presentation. Excuse me. And I had questions about that too. So just to clarify, so there's the Victim Services Division, and then there was the Community Affairs Division that in this current fiscal year, we allocated roughly $9 million for. So how has that money been reallocated in the department? Did that money just go with the officers as they were kind of reallocated to the different divisions?
Correct. So all of the salaries and benefits of the officers that were in community affairs were moved to whatever stations or commands they were moved to. And then the supplies budget, the miscellaneous budget was rolled into the community engagement unit, which was that core group that stayed from community affairs that now reports to field operations.
So have we had to allocate any other funding to accommodate this change in policy other than just shifting?
No, ma'am,
the money?
not
Okay.
right now.
For the cadet classes, I'm happy to hear that we're getting more competitive and getting more officers. How many officers are we still short? I know that's a hard number to answer, but
It is.
roughly.
There's been a variety of manpower studies done over the years by a variety of people. There was one time where one was commissioned by the city, one was commissioned by a labor group, there was another one was commissioned by an outside entity, and they all come up with various numbers. And these studies are anywhere from 8 to 10 to 12 years old, and they all come around the 6,500 to 7,000 number. I think the answer for me is we can never have enough as long as we can stay within budget. And that is another trick with the budget. As attrition decreases, which is a blessing, your overtime should decrease as well, because as the year goes on and we constantly look at the budget and try to make adjustments in cost centers or other programs to add to overtime as needed, again, we're looking at that bottom line budget all the time. So as we increase officers, we should be decreasing the amount of overtime spent. Like I said, we were down 22% this year in overtime spent by dollar amount and 27% in hours spent. So as we increase the number of officers, we hope that overtime spending would decrease to stay at the bottom line also.
And how many cadet classes are scheduled for FY27?
5.
5. And if we found funding for an additional 6th class, is that something that HPD has the resources to support?
It is very difficult. It's difficult logistically, it's difficult financially. But yes, if we had the number of applicants that were qualified to fill 6th class, the more the merrier.
For the Human Trafficking Revenue Fund, you mentioned that there was a decrease in that fund. Why was there a decrease, or is there projected to be a decrease in that fund?
It's for the seizures, and it's specific for that activity. Meaning, it's the seizures of assets from related to the human trafficking can only be used for the victims. And I think that fund was just set up like last year.
So we're just projecting fewer seizures than?
Right.
Okay.
Yes, yeah.
Councilmember Ramirez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you both for the presentation. I understand the budget has to grow as salary increases come into effect, just because most of the budget is salary, right? We noticed out of the big book, I'm going to ask you some questions out of the big book that we got. Of course, the budget is growing, but the rate of increase is growing as well. In 24, it was at about 4%. 25, it was almost 5%. 26, just over 6%. 27, almost 8%. So do you foresee that continuing? Because if it does, it has significant implications several years out, as far as the overall budget. But do you expect the rate of increase to continue in the next few years, if that makes sense?
Yeah, just like the contract for the meet and confer, last year for the classified was 10%, and the FY27 is 8%, and I believe next year it's 6%. So it's going to be, with the contractual obligations, that will be increasing.
And what about after the 6%? Do you have that information?
Yeah, for the effective July 1st, 2028 would be another 6%, and then July 2029 is 6.5%.
Okay.
That's the classified meet and confer contract.
Okay, thank you for that. Let me ask you about administrative services. There's a page, and it's page 51. If you have the book, you may not have it with you. Page 51, business area 1000, administrative services. It breaks down the number of civilian classified cadet that are assigned to administrative services. And for FY27, the projection is 165 classified under administrative services. 2 years ago, FY25, it was 83. So it looks like on paper, maybe I'm reading this wrong, it looks like on paper we've got more classified officers assigned to administrative services. Is that correct, or?
It's correct by title, but not administrative work. So the new division I discussed, operational support,
Okay.
they fall under, right now in the organizational chart, they're under the chief of staff, Chief Colley. And so that comes out of the chief's office. So those bodies are listed, classified as administrative services. They are doing the absolute opposite of administrative work.
Okay, great. So they're on the street, they're not
Yes, sir.
behind a desk somewhere. Okay,
Correct.
thank you for that clarification. I'll go back into the queue.
Councilmember Martinez.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Thank you for the presentation. Appreciate really identifying how we've been able to catch up with the officers that are leaving compared to those that are coming in. Because I think my first year, the chief was saying that 10 years prior, we had less officers at that time than what we had 10 years prior to that. So it's good to see that. But I do want to just get back to a little bit of what my vice chair was discussing on community outreach. I can appreciate that every officer is doing community outreach, but quite frankly, I don't agree with it. I think there's some things that need to be very specific, very intentional, training as well. The Police Activity League is one that I think is, not everything has to be reactive, but there's proactive law enforcement work that should be done as well. And so I want to push back just a little bit because as I've looking at the performance measures, for FY25, there's 163,000 community outreach program participation. Currently in the Q3, it's 83, so there's a decrease in that actual community participation. When we start looking at PIP meetings, 4,700, now 1,300. And again, I think the opportunities to be able to, and you were speaking to it, being able to have those interactions with more officers, so being able to stop and talk to the dry cleaners or talk to the, the restaurant owner, but even more intentional actual education on reporting, how to report certain things. One of the things that I've been a huge advocate of is how do we make sure, especially our Spanish-speaking community, how do they find ways to partner with our local law enforcement? And so I can appreciate saying that every officer will be doing community outreach, but I also, quite frankly, because of the work that y'all do, unfortunately can't do it in that capacity. So I would encourage you all, even more so, Chief, to identify how we could reach folks on social media. There is a pretty good platform that was really speaking to all kinds of communities, not just one particular community, but all kinds of communities on what to report, DMV, whenever folks are breaking into vehicles, how to report that. And so having more of those neighborhood meetings are important. And, just seeing the decrease in engagement, it raises some red flags to me. That's where trust breaks down, and community policing is important to me. It's something that I think Houston was always prided in across the country. And as we disconnect from that, building that trust back makes it so much more difficult. So I don't know if you have any comments to that, but again, I just push back a little bit that every law enforcement officer, every police officer on the streets is going to be able to do that community outreach.
I do have a response. So thank you for your comments. I would like to point out that every station still has the numbers on this slide. Part of it has to do with the way we were tracking the numbers. As we looked at the Community Affairs Division and the way the numbers were being tracked and the way the interactions were being tracked, there were some numbers that I found to be unrealistic. As we changed the way we track numbers within community events or community engagement unit, I believe we're tracking numbers more accurately right now. I do also want to point out that our PIP meetings have not gone away. Our PIP meetings per station still exist. Our citywide PIP meetings still exist. We used to do the citywide PIP at the Union every single PIP meeting, and one of the complaints we heard when we go out to town halls or community events was that it's just not reasonable to get to it. So now we travel around the city. Every PIP meeting is in a different place around the city to allow different communities to come and hear the presentation and engage with our command staff. Our differential response teams at our stations are still doing community work. So while what I said is accurate, we hope and expect every officer to be a liaison to the community. We still have sections or units within every police station, every division, that are doing community work. They're just not in the Community Affairs Division. If that makes sense.
Got it. One, if I can just add this last question, as that division was taken away, still doing it, right? The thought process was there'd be boots on the ground, right? Do y'all have a number, or are they participating in calls for services as well? Those folks that were taken out. I have several. As a former staffer, I know a lot of these folks that were doing some of this work. And I just want to have an understanding that those that were taken out of this more direct kind of interaction, are they rolled into calls for services as well, or are they doing some other duties?
It varied per individual. Most went to a differential response team or a community engagement unit at a division. Some did go to the calls for service loop.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Flickinger.
Thank you, Chief. Response time. I look at your slide, page 15. Looks like the response time actually got worse for level 1 calls.
When the data was pulled at the end of April, that response time is up. As it stands today, it is down at 529, I want to say.
Okay. Overtime. Joint processing, is that still causing issues?
Yes.
Okay. Some of the officers have told me they can spend depending on when they go, it is multiple hours that they're spending down there. So hopefully the county can do something to resolve that. Also with the overtime, there was an article came out in the Chronicle, so please correct me if it's wrong, it is the Chronicle. Officer Davis, I know here last year had been reassigned from traffic after he'd gotten about $170,000 in overtime. the Chronicle states that he had two other issues with overtime previously. One in 2012 where he got suspended 30 days, and then 2013 where he got suspended 15 days. Do you know if that's correct?
I do believe that to be correct.
Okay. How's it looked at when somebody has multiple issues with the same type of, infraction like that? I mean, I would think one of the things maybe the department would say is that you're not allowed any overtime ever, given that he's apparently abused the system on multiple occasions.
There was a feeling of that potentially, and that is why he is now where he is.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much.
One question I wanted to ask on slide 19, which is the traffic enforcement slide. The KPI, reduced percentage of vehicle, bicycle, and pedestrian fatalities. In FY25, it was a 2.2 annual percentage decrease. We haven't seen a KPI for that since an actual percentage number. My concern is that we have a lot of vehicular, pedestrian incidents, deaths, accidents. Why did we see that number or that KPI drop off?
Oh, you mean on the NA for?
Yes, correct.
I'm not sure why it's not there. I can tell you exactly what the reduction in both accidents and fatalities are right now. We have an 8% reduction in minor and major crashes and an 11% year-to-date reduction in fatalities so far. But I will get you an answer for why that's not on there.
I would appreciate it. I know that we hear a lot about people getting struck, either pedestrian, cycling. We hear about the major accidents, and so that would be helpful to know on that specific KPI.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Councilmember or Vice Mayor Pro Tem Peck.
Thank you. One last question. The program to allow retired officers to come back and work on an hourly basis, can you give us a little more detail about why we're eliminating that?
It was a source of income that we could eliminate to try to close the gap without getting rid of any classified officers and without getting rid of or laying off any civilian officers, right? So as we look to try to close the budget gap and further align budget shortfalls with our performance metrics and what we want to provide to the citizens, it was a fund that would allow us to save $1.5 million without affecting anybody who's a full-time employee.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Ramirez.
Thank you, Chair. Following up on what Councilmember Martinez asked about the community liaisons, we have heard repeatedly from the Asian community, the African American community, LGBTQ community that they would like to have their liaisons back. I understand maybe 75, officers aren't required for that sort of thing, but have y'all given thought to paring it down so that, you've got fewer officers that are still liaisoning with those communities?
We still have an LGBTQ liaison. She's assigned to Central Division DRT, but she still serves as a liaison as well. My question would be, what are they looking to gain from reaching out to that specific one human being as opposed to the individuals that serve that community or the captain of that division?
Well, I don't know that they specifically know the individuals working on a given shift at a given time, but I believe, without speaking for them, that there was a comfort level and a level of trust. I'm happy to try to bring some of those folks in to visit with you or someone else within the department if y'all would be willing to do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
My answer would be, I would hope that level of trust would be established with the individuals working at that station, wherever they are in the city.
Yeah. Okay. I appreciate that. The Operational Support Division sounds like a great idea. I'm wondering about other sort of specialized units. For instance, we still continue to get a lot of noise complaints throughout the city. And sometimes it seems like they don't have all the equipment that they might need. So, just to highlight that, that there continue to be those complaints, and hopefully, if we can beef up at all enforcement of those violations, which, as I mentioned, occur throughout the city, that would be a good thing. Also wanted to ask you about mental health response. I know that you guys touched on that a little bit, and reference was made to a citywide mental health crisis, CIT. Does that refer to the specially trained officers patrolling at any given time?
It does.
It does, okay. And do you know at any given time how many of those units we have patrolling the city?
Are you referring to the CERT units, that's one officer and a clinician, or a crisis intervention trained officer?
How about both?
We have over 4,000 crisis intervention trained officers. I can't remember the class we started with years ago. Luckily, the Houston Police Department was on the forefront of crisis intervention training and de-escalation with people in crisis.
And is that now a TCOL requirement?
It is.
Okay, great. The other specialized teams?
The CERT teams that are a clinician and an officer respond to as many calls as they can that their workload allows, I would say. And so there are times where you have a variety, or I should say a lot of CIT calls that could benefit from a CERT unit, and there just aren't enough of them. Oftentimes there'll be a phone consultation. We can use the core or we were using the core program, which is a tele-appointment with a clinician, which had some success, but we're going to move it to a cell phone because it was on iPads, and now we all have city cell phones. But yeah, the mental health calls are a very high frequency. And we've done a great job in Harris County and the city of Houston of trying to divert as many as we can, understand that patience is what's required for someone that's in crisis, and to do everything we can to get them the help they need. And I'm very proud of what the department has done over the decades in leading the charge of understanding that being in crisis is not a crime. So if you are a danger to yourself or others, we're there to get you help, nothing else.
And I applaud that, and I've personally seen a mental health incident handled with great care and discretion by one of your sergeants and actually a patrol officer before that, and I should have noted his name and sent a commendation letter on him, but no, I applaud that, and the state requirement that training be mandatory of our cadets. So I want to come back to this, and I'll go back in the queue.
Thanks, Councilmember Ramirez. So, Chief, on the 419 Emancipation Facility, I understand the homeless outreach team will be stationed there. Will HPD be receiving any reimbursements at all for the officers being on site, or incur any additional costs at all?
No. No to both.
Great, thank you for that. And then we're back to Councilmember Ramirez.
Thank you, Chair. Just to finish up on the mental health topic, we think very highly of the crisis call diversion aspect of 911 that can keep people out of the criminal justice system that don't need to be there. And we're concerned that funding considerations might reduce the staffing 24/7 to handle those calls. Do you feel that there's adequate staffing 24/7 to handle those kinds of calls through 911?
At the crisis diversion at the HEC, that does not fall under us. I can look into it and give you an answer. Look, we can never have enough staffing for mental health.
Okay. Let me ask you about overtime. So FY27 budget projects that overtime, if I understand this correctly, overtime will decrease 22% over the fiscal year? Does that sound about right?
The allocated money is
Allocated money.
decreased by 22%.
Okay, all right. Can you tell us what sort of operational changes, what's going to be different this coming fiscal year that will bring that number down?
Well, we hope to bring the number down, but I can't guarantee that we will. In the past, the general fund classified overtime has been $14 million. This year, it's being bumped up to over 21. And that 14 million, I will tell you right now, is taken up by holidays and the Houston airport system right off the bat. That $14 million is gone immediately.
An airport, do we get an interfund transfer from them? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Everything at both airports, salaries, vehicles, everything is reimbursed by Haas, but it's that general fund. Right? So the airports and holidays, if you remember, the council was kind enough to add 2 more holidays to city holidays, so there's now 13 holidays, 6 of which the days vary throughout the year in terms of day of the week, as the calendar year moves on. Once you get past those 2, all operational overtime until this budget, adding the 6.5, comes from savings from other places. The addition of the 6.5, I can't really anticipate. I mean, I would tell you that historically, yes, we're going to spend more than that. For instance, last budget year, we spent $39 million in general fund classified overtime. This year, we're projected to spend about $30 million, right? So you're down $9 million. I understand the tendency to say, why wouldn't you budget the same you spent last year? Well, had we done that last budget cycle, we would have been $9 million over in that overtime account, and we would have had to move it around. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. We're trying to move the budget closer to what allocations are, but oftentimes the allocations are very difficult to anticipate. For instance, this year, knock on wood, we didn't have any weather events except for one, a winter storm in January that we had to deal with, or maybe February. We had no hurricanes. The year before we had hurricanes. So there's a variety of issues that come up throughout the year. Global affairs. This past year, we spent a lot of money on protests for a couple different causes that were impacted by global affairs that really had nothing to do with us as a city of Houston. It just had to do with the fact there was people in our city that wanted to express their First Amendment right to protest, and we're happy to support that. So we spent more money in that bucket this year, and so we're just constantly trying to play the balance game. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you that's all the money in overtime I'm going to spend this year, because I can't guarantee you.
Okay, I appreciate that. Is there anyone else in the queue? It's just me. All right, so let's finish up here. So to your point, I'm glad you pointed this out. When we adopt additional holidays, that means overtime increases, because if you're a police officer and you're having to work a holiday, that's overtime pay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And just to make sure folks understand, if an officer calls in sick and another officer has to come in and take their place, or if they take vacation time, does that result in additional overtime or not?
When an officer calls in sick, there's not another officer that comes in to replace him. Our staffing per station, per shift, per district is done in a manner in which there is a certain number of allowable, we call them spots in the book because it's spots to be off, right? So let's say your shift has 5 spots of vacation or time burned that shift. The staffing is done in a manner to which you understand and assume those 5 spots are going to be filled every shift because people want to enjoy their time off. And then there is a little bit of overage baked in for people that call in for unplanned circumstances. They're sick child, whatever the case may be. So at the Houston Police Department, if you work in Central Division 1 district and you call in sick, we do not order somebody in for overtime. That is one of the ways that we control overtime the best we can. The other officers in that district pick up the slack.
All right, and it's just a given that department-wide, you're going to have a certain number of officers who call in sick on a given day.
Yes, sir.
And, or take off for some approved cause. Okay, thank you for that. And last subject I'll ask you about is, we've visited a little bit about rapid scan DNA machine, possibly at the Joint Processing Center. Does that sound like something, if we were able to find part of the money or all of the money, that sounds like something that the police department would support?
Yes, I think any tool or piece of technology that increases the speed at which we can catch suspects, we're all for.
Yeah, and just so everyone knows, that sort of instrument can be like taking somebody's fingerprint, entering it into a database, and then when a match is found, some other crime, some other agency, that's a good thing. But that's what a rapid scan DNA instrument can do, as I understand it. Is that right?
That is also my understanding, but
Yeah.
I would refer to Dr. Stout for that.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Chief, and thank you.
All right, Chief and Interim CFO Tran, thank you all so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.